September 5, 1972. Munich, Olympic Village. A German police sniper lies on a rooftop, sweating. Through his scope, he sees a Black September terrorist holding an Israeli athlete at gunpoint. The officer squeezes the trigger of his H&K G3 battle rifle. He misses. In the chaos that follows, a grenade detonates inside a helicopter. By morning, 11 hostages are dead. The world watched in horror, but for the police, the lesson was written in blood. You cannot use a sledgehammer to perform brain surgery. The police were armed with weapons of war designed to kill soldiers at 500 meters, not to save lives in a crowded room. They needed a new kind of weapon, a weapon that was fast, precise, and surgical. They didn't know it yet, but the answer was already sitting in a factory in Oberndorf, gathering dust. To understand why the Heckler Koch MP5 became that answer, we have to look at the junk that existed before it. In the 1960s, the submachine gun market was crude. If you were a soldier, you were issued something like the Uzi or the British Sterling. These were simple metal tubes with heavy springs inside, firing from an open bolt. Here is the problem with that design. When you pulled the trigger, a massive chunk of steel slammed forward before the bullet fired. Just as you were trying to aim, a heavy metal weight crashed inside your gun. It threw your aim off before the bullet even left the barrel. These weren't precision tools. They were bullet hoses, great for suppressing an enemy in a trench, terrible for hitting a bad guy standing next to a hostage. Engineers at Heckler & Koch looked at this rattling technology and decided to do something insane. They took their heavy battle rifle, the G3, and essentially shrunk it down to fire a pistol cartridge. But they kept the complex, expensive heart of the rifle, the roller-delayed blowback system. This was a radical departure from tradition. The system works by using two small steel rollers that lock the bolt into the barrel extension. When a round is fired, the rearward pressure has to force these rollers inward against a locking piece before the bolt can move. This mechanical disadvantage creates a split-second delay, keeping the breech closed until pressure drops to safe levels. It is complex physics, but the result is magic. The MP5 fires from a closed bolt. When you pull the trigger, nothing moves inside the gun except the hammer. No lurching, no shaking. The recoil impulse is smooth, almost hydraulic. It wasn't a machine gun anymore. It was effectively a 9mm sniper rifle. However, this perfection came with a cost, literally. The original project, designated the HK-54, was a manufacturing nightmare compared to the stamped steel of an AK-47 or an Uzi. Every MP5 required precision machining, high-quality steel, and rigorous quality control. In the mid-60s, this was a hard sell. Why would a police chief pay $300 for a German precision instrument when he could buy 3 American grease guns for the same price? The Project 64 stalled. It was mocked as the Rolls-Royce of submachine guns, meant as an insult, implying it was too fancy for dirty work. For nearly a decade, the MP5 was the best gun that nobody wanted. It sat in the HK catalog, an orphan of engineering, waiting for a war that demanded quality over quantity. Speaking of mechanics, let's pause for a second. If you've played Counter-Strike or Call of Duty, you know the iconic reload animation, locking the bolt back and slapping the handle down, known as the HK slap. Pause the video and write in the comments, what is your favorite video game memory with the MP5? Was it CS 1.6 or Modern Warfare? Let's see which generation dominates the comments. The tragedy in Munich changed the calculus overnight. Western governments realized they were vulnerable to a new kind of enemy, one that hid among civilians. They began forming elite counterterrorism units, teams that money couldn't buy who needed equipment that couldn't fail. The German GSG-9 was formed directly in response to Munich, and they became the first major adopter of the MP5. They needed a weapon that could hit a target the size of a grapefruit at 25 meters instantly. The cheap Uzi couldn't do that. The heavy G3 couldn't do that. Only the MP5 could. The stage was being set for the MP5 to step out of the shadows. It just needed one perfect televised moment to prove that it wasn't a toy, but the deadliest instrument of the 20th century. While the Germans quietly adopted the MP5 for their new unit GSG-9, the rest of the world still viewed it as a niche curiosity. The gun had its first real combat test in 1977 during the hijacking of Lufthansa Flight 181 in Mogadishu. GSG-9 commandos stormed the plane and neutralized the terrorists using MP5s without harming a single passenger. It was a flawless operation, but it happened far away, in the dark, away from the cameras. The world needed to see the power of this weapon to believe it. That visual confirmation arrived on May 5, 1980. It was a bank holiday in London, and terrorists had seized the Iranian embassy at Prince's Gate. Millions of people were glued to their television sets, interrupting the snooker finals to watch the breaking news. For 6 days, negotiations dragged on in a tense standoff. Then, the terrorists killed a hostage and threw his body onto the street. Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher gave the order, "Go in." For the first time in history, the public saw the Special Air Service, SAS, in action, live on national television. Men dressed entirely in black, wearing terrifying S-10 respirators, abseiled down the building and blew the windows with frame charges. What they carried in their hands became an instant icon. The SAS were using the MP5. Inside the smoke-filled embassy, the weapon's characteristics shone. The fighting was brutal and claustrophobic. The SAS were moving through rooms filled with tear gas and smoke, distinguishing terrorists from hostages in split seconds. The MP5's compact size, just 27 inches long, allowed the operators to maneuver in tight hallways where a standard rifle would have snagged on door frames. The closed-bolt system meant that they could double-tap terrorists with terrifying precision without hitting the hostages sitting inches away. One operator famously jammed his MP5 against a terrorist's chest and pulled the trigger, trusting the weapon to cycle even in direct contact. In just 17 minutes, the SAS killed 5 terrorists and captured 1. The only hostages who died were killed by terrorists before the SAS entered the room. After Operation Nimrod, the MP5 became a celebrity overnight. It was the Excalibur of the 20th century. The image of the black-clad soldier with the distinctive curved magazine was burned into the public consciousness. Every Special Forces unit, from the U.S. Navy SEALs to the French GIGN, looked at the footage from London and demanded the gun the SAS used. Heckler and Koch couldn't build them fast enough. They had to expand their factory in Oberndorf just to meet the orders coming from America. The MP5 became the gold standard. It wasn't just a weapon, it was a badge of office. If a unit carried Uzis, they were second tier. If they carried MP5s, they were tier 1. The cultural impact was just as massive as the tactical one. Hollywood directors saw the footage from London and realized, this is what a hero looks like. The MP5 replaced the revolver and the shotgun in action movies. It became the good guy gun in Die Hard, SWAT, and eventually The Matrix. But this fame masked a looming problem. The MP5 was designed in an era of soft targets. It was built to kill men in shirts and jackets. But by the 1990s, the Soviet Union had collapsed, flooding the black market with heavy weapons and military-grade body armor. The king of CQB was sitting on a throne that was about to crumble under the weight of a new armored reality.
February 28, 1997, North Hollywood, Los Angeles. This was the day the rules of engagement changed forever. 2 bank robbers, Larry Phillips Jr. and Emil Matasareanu, stepped out of a Bank of America branch, but they didn't run. They stood their ground. They were prepared for war, having spent months modifying their equipment. They were wearing illegally modified full-body suits of aramid armor, covering everything from their necks to their shins. They had sewn trauma plates into their clothing. They looked and acted like juggernauts from a dystopian future. When the LAPD officers opened fire, they witnessed a nightmare. Their .38 revolvers and 9mm Berettas popped harmlessly. Even the patrol officers, armed with shotguns, watched in disbelief as their buckshot simply bounced off the robber's armor. The 9mm round, the same cartridge used by the MP5, was moving at about 1,100 feet per second. It was too slow. It lacked the pointed energy to penetrate the heavy layers of Kevlar. For 44 minutes, the robbers unleashed hell with illegal, fully automatic Norinco Type 56 and HK-91 rifles. They fired over 1,100 rounds. The police were pinned down behind their cars, which were being shredded by high-velocity rifle fire. The situation was so desperate that officers did something unprecedented in modern policing history. They ran to a local gun store, B&B Sales, and requisitioned semi-automatic AR-15s straight off the shelf. They needed firepower. They needed range. They needed to punch through that armor. While the SWAT team eventually arrived and ended the fight, the damage to the MP5's reputation was done. The footage of police bullets bouncing off the robbers was played on every news channel in America. The conclusion was brutal. The 9mm submachine gun is obsolete. This shootout was the death knell for the submachine gun as the primary weapon of law enforcement. The logic was brutal but simple. If a bad guy wears armor, the MP5 is useless. You cannot solve a physics problem with nostalgia. A 9mm bullet is short, fat, and slow. A 5.56mm rifle bullet is thin, pointed, and travels at 3 times the speed of sound, 3,000 FPS. Speed penetrates armor. Kinetic energy, E = mc squared, favors velocity over mass. The math was undeniably on the side of the rifle. Almost overnight, the landscape changed. SWAT teams and special forces began dumping their MP5s into storage crates. They replaced them with short-barreled rifles like the M4 Carbine and the Mk18. These new weapons were almost as short as the MP5, but fired a rifle round that could shred body armor at 300 meters. The patrol rifle program became standard across the U.S. The reign of the pistol caliber was over. The MP5 was viewed as a relic, a tool for a simpler time when bad guys didn't wear military-grade protection. If you have ever stood next to a short-barreled rifle, SBR, being fired indoors, you know it is a physical assault on your senses. A 5.56mm rifle with a 10-inch barrel is essentially a flashbang grenade that also throws bullets. Unburned powder explodes outside the barrel, creating a massive concussion wave. It hits you in the chest. The muzzle flash blinds night vision goggles. The noise is deafening even through expensive Peltor headsets. In a stealth operation where communication is life, that chaos is a liability. You can't hear your teammates. You can't hear the enemy flanking you. This is where the MP5 reveals its final unbeatable ace, the MP5 SD. SD stands for Schalldampfer, German for sound dampener. This isn't just an MP5 with a can screwed on the end. It is a completely different weapon system designed from the ground up for silence. Most guns require special subsonic ammunition to be truly quiet. If you put regular high-velocity ammo in a suppressed pistol, the bullet still breaks the sound barrier with a loud crack, no matter how good your silencer is. Logistics-wise, this is a nightmare. You have to carry 2 types of ammo. But the German engineers performed one last magic trick. The MP5 SD barrel has 30 tiny ports drilled into it right at the base, near the chamber. These ports bleed off hot gas before the bullet accelerates. This drops the pressure so dramatically that a standard subsonic 115-grain bullet is slowed down to subsonic speeds automatically. You can feed this gun cheap, standard NATO ammo and it turns it into a whisper.
The result is not just quiet, it is Hollywood quiet. The action of the roller-delayed bolt is so smooth that you mostly hear the mechanical clocking of metal parts, like a heavy typewriter. For sentry removal, covert infiltration, or operating in environments where you need to hear your team's whispers, the MP5 SD has no equal. The modern competitors, like the SIG MCX or the Honey Badger, firing 300 Blackout, try to replicate this. but they often suffer from gas blowback in the shooter's face or overheating issues. The MP5 SD remains the gold standard of suppression, despite being a maintenance nightmare due to carbon buildup in the barrel ports. It's a high-maintenance diva, but it sings a song no other gun can match. The verdict: the specialist scalpel. So why is the MP5 still here in 2024? The answer lies in the evolution of warfare. In the 1980s, the MP5 was a hammer, used for everything. Today, it is a scalpel. If you are going to war in the mountains of Afghanistan or the streets of Fallujah, you take a rifle. You need the range and the armor penetration. The MP5 has lost that war. But if you are a Tier 1 operator boarding an oil tanker at night, or rescuing hostages in a pressurized aircraft, or silently clearing a building where over-penetration kills kids, you reach for the MP5. It is no longer the primary weapon of the world, but it remains the ultimate specialist weapon. It survived because it does things that the modern, modular, plastic, fantastic rifles simply cannot do. Old physics didn't fail. It just found its niche. The dinosaur isn't extinct. It just became the most dangerous predator in the dark. Engagement trigger. This was a massive pivot in military history. The shift from submachine guns to carbines, like the M4, defined the global war on terror. Let us know in the comments, in a zombie apocalypse, would you choose the reliability and lightness of an MP5 or the raw power of an M4 carbine? By the mid-2000s, it seemed the story was over. The MP5 was supposed to fade away, replaced by the modular, plastic, fantastic AR-15 platform. But it didn't. Today, in 2024, if you look inside the armories of Tier 1 units, you will still find MP5s sitting on the rack, oiled and ready. Why? Because the new wonder weapon, the short-barreled rifle, turned out to have a terrifying side effect, a flaw so dangerous that in certain situations, using an M4 is not just overkill, it is criminal negligence. The short-barreled rifle solved the armor problem, but it introduced a terrifying new variable into the equation of close-quarters battle, CQB. It's called over-penetration. To understand this, we have to look at the construction of a typical modern house or office. It's mostly drywall, 2 sheets of paper with some chalk in between. It offers almost zero ballistic protection. Imagine a typical hostage rescue scenario. You are an operator armed with an Mk-18 rifle firing 5.55mm M855 green tip ammunition. This ammo has a steel penetrator tip designed to punch through Soviet helmets. You breach the door, see the threat, and fire. The physics are brutal. The rifle bullet is traveling at nearly 3,000 feet per second. It hits the terrorist, but because the target is soft, human body, the steel-tipped bullet doesn't deform. It zips right through him, retaining most of its lethal energy. It punches through the wall behind him, flies across the hallway, punches through the next wall, and kills the hostage's child sleeping in the next room. The bullet doesn't know the fight is over just because it hit the bad guy. In the eyes of a liability lawyer or a grieving family, that rifle is a disaster waiting to happen. This phenomenon was highlighted in engagements like Black Hawk Down, where soldiers complained that their 5.56 rounds were passing straight through skinny militia fighters without stopping them. The stopping power was wasted on the air behind the target. This is where the obsolete MP5 makes its stunning comeback. When loaded with modern hollow point or frangible ammunition, the 9mm round behaves completely differently. Upon impact, the bullet expands like a flower. It doubles its diameter and acts like a parachute, creating a massive wound channel and dumping 100% of its energy into the target. It stops inside the bad guy. It doesn't go through walls. It doesn't kill neighbors. It transfers all its kinetic force into the threat, knocking them off balance.
This physics reality makes the MP5 the undisputed king of tube assault, operations inside airplanes, trains, or ships. Inside a pressurized Boeing 747, You do not want to fire a high-velocity rifle round that could pierce the fuselage at 30,000 feet or destroy sensitive hydraulic systems hidden behind thin plastic panels. On a steel ship, a rifle bullet might ricochet unpredictably, wounding your own team in a narrow corridor. In these claustrophobic, fragile environments, the lower velocity of the MP5 isn't a bug, it's the primary feature. It offers control in a chaotic world. Engagement trigger. This debate between stopping power versus safety is endless in the gun community. Tell us in the comments, for home defense, where your family is in the other room, would you trust a 9mm or a rifle? What's your setup? So, the MP5 survived the rifle revolution because it is safer for the innocent. But there is one final reason why elite units refuse to let it go. It's a reason that isn't about ballistics or armor. It's about the senses. If you have ever fired a short-barreled rifle indoors without ear protection, you know it feels like a flashbang going off in your face. But the MP5 has a secret configuration that turns the roar of gunfire into a whisper. If you have ever stood next to a short-barreled rifle, SBR, being fired indoors, you know it is a physical assault on your senses. A 5.56mm rifle with a 10-inch barrel is essentially a flashbang grenade that also throws bullets. Unburnt powder explodes outside the barrel, creating a massive concussion wave. It hits you in the chest. The muzzle flash blinds night vision goggles. The noise is deafening even through expensive Peltor headsets. In a stealth operation, where communication is life, that chaos is a liability. You can't hear your teammates. You can't hear the enemy flanking you. This is where the MP5 reveals its final, unbeatable ace, the MP5 SD. SD stands for Schalldämpfer, German for sound dampener. This isn't just an MP5 with a can screwed on the end. It is a completely different weapon system designed from the ground up for silence. Most guns require special subsonic ammunition to be truly quiet. If you put regular high-velocity ammo in a suppressed pistol, the bullet still breaks the sound barrier with a loud crack, no matter how good your silencer is. Logistics-wise, this is a nightmare. You have to carry two types of ammo. But the German engineers performed one last magic trick. The MP5 SD barrel has 30 tiny ports drilled into it right at the base, near the chamber. These ports bleed off hot gas before the bullet accelerates. This drops the pressure so dramatically that a standard subsonic 115 grain bullet is slowed down to subsonic speeds, around 900 FPS, automatically. You can feed this gun cheap, standard NATO ammo, and it turns it into a whisper. The result is not just quiet, it is Hollywood quiet. The action of the roller-delayed bolt is so smooth that you mostly hear the mechanical clacking of metal parts, like a heavy typewriter. For sentry removal, covert infiltration, or operating in environments where you need to hear your team's whispers, the MP5 SD has no equal. The modern competitors, like the SIG MCX or the Honey Badger, firing 300 blackout, try to replicate this, but they often suffer from gas blowback in the shooter's face or overheating issues. The MP5 SD remains the gold standard of suppression, despite being a maintenance nightmare due to carbon buildup in the barrel ports. It's a high-maintenance diva, but it sings a song no other gun can match. The verdict: the specialist's scalpel. So, why is the MP5 still here in 2024? The answer lies in the evolution of warfare. In the 1980s, the MP5 was a hammer, used for everything. Today, it is a scalpel. If you are going to war in the mountains of Afghanistan or the streets of Fallujah, you take a rifle. You need the range and the armor penetration. The MP5 has lost that war. But if you are a Tier 1 operator boarding an oil tanker at night, or rescuing hostages in a pressurized aircraft, or silently clearing a building where overpenetration kills kids, you reach for the MP5. It is no longer the primary weapon of the world, but it remains the ultimate specialist weapon. It survived because it does things that the modern, modular, plastic fantastic rifles simply cannot do. Old physics didn't fail. It just found its niche. The dinosaur isn't extinct. It just became the most dangerous predator in the dark.